The final process that human resource managers have to deal with is the separation process. And it seems strange to call it separation because it's not really like a relationship, but it is kind of a relationship. I call it the losing process. You can't really think of it in terms of either quitting or firing. And when you're younger, you think of those things. You think of those two things. Well, I can quit, or I can get fired. You don't think of things like retirement. You definitely don't think of things like redundancy unless someone in your family has been made redundant and you say, oh, well, what's that? So we need a word that kind of covers all of these things. And the technical word is separation. The first thing that I want to make sure is that you spell separation correctly. It's separation, not separation. This is, again, one of those things that you're not getting marked on. But if you write separation, the mark is just going to go, oh my God, someone else that doesn't know how to spell separation. And they're going to go, okay, I'm not going to give them lower marks just because of that. But secretly they are. They're not going to even think that they are, but they're going to get this bad impression. And if they have to choose between, like I said before, there's 7 marks or 8 marks, they're going to choose 7 marks because they got a bad feeling when you wrote separation. So, how are you supposed to know what you're talking about if you can't spell the word? So separation, and it's not a capital A. I'm just trying to show you that the A is important. Right, little s, little e, little p, capital A. You use just a small a, but that is how you spell it. Anyway, there are 2 ways that you can lose people, 2 general categories. The first one is involuntarily, which is against the worker's will. So involuntary applies to the worker, not to you. You're not necessarily going to lose someone against your will. But there are some involuntary ways. The first one, and the one that you think about all the time, is dismissal. The first thing is that you need to know how you can dismiss someone. You need to follow the requirements of the Fair Work Act, because there are some things about, unfair dismissal. There are actually laws against unfair dismissal. You have to have some sort of legitimate grounds, and grounds just means like reasons. So you have to have a good reason, a legal reason to dismiss that person. So maybe you have particular behavior standards, and they have to be reasonable, not like, you're not allowed to swear or something like that at all or whatever. You need to have, behavior standards that the Fair Work Act is actually going to back you up on. You might have repeated poor performance, and you've given them 3, written warnings, and you've given them, the average is usually about 3 weeks. You're supposed to, under the Fair Work Act, even though it doesn't particularly say a number of days, you should probably give them at least 3 weeks. When they're deciding whether it was fair or unfair, they're going to probably look at about 3 weeks of time to improve, rather than just firing them. You can't fire them on the spot. If you're a small business with 15 or fewer workers, then it's much easier to fire people because you're only asked to follow the Small Business Fair Dismissal Code, rather than the requirements of the Fair Work Act. Because if you're a small business, you don't really, if there's only one person working for you, you don't really want to have to go through this great long process of giving them, verbal warnings and written warnings and how they can improve and all that, because your business is suffering and it can just sink the business completely. So they want to make sure that smaller businesses can get bigger and keep functioning as well by allowing them to just go, you know what, you don't have to follow the Fair Work Act, but here we've got this code for you that you should follow. What is HR's role in all of this? Well, they have to make sure the process is fair. So make sure that they've been given written warnings and verbal warnings. Make sure that there's no signs of discrimination. If the person's pregnant or something like that, oh my God, don't do it. So you need to make sure that the process is fair. You also need to make sure that it's allowed in their contract for the person to be fired for that. I mean, you can't just say, you know what, in your contract it doesn't say anything about this, but we're going to fire you because you're not doing it. It's really not something that you can do. So you need to go through their contract carefully and find any section that might actually apply and say, look, you're getting fired because of this section and you didn't improve it. You've been given warnings for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, and you still haven't improved. And you really need to make sure that Fair Work Act is not breached, not just because of the penalties that come with it, but also of the bad publicity that comes with it as well. Now, when it comes to voluntary separation, where it's of the worker's own free will, the one that you think about a lot is resignation, so quitting, right? How do they do this? Well, usually they just say, I quit. But they're generally required to give notice. They can't just take off straight away. And they generally, keep getting paid and all that. But they're generally required to give notice. It might be like 4 weeks notice or whatever. according to their contract. What's HR's role in all of that? Well, something that they should do is try to work out why this person is resigning. What they do is exit interviews to try and work out why they're leaving. Now, why would you find out why someone's leaving? The same reason why if someone says, "Oh, I'm going to dump you," the first question you ask is why. You don't just go, "All right, fine," and then just leave, because you're going to be left wondering, well, why? Why was I dumped? So, and the other way around, you need to know some sort of reasons on both sides. So if you are resigning, then there might be serious problems that are causing you to leave. And that might be a good worker, and you don't want to lose that worker, but it's too late. They've already resigned. They've already decided, I'm leaving. You can try to convince them to stay by using incentives like, oh, no, don't leave, don't resign. You can have a promotion, or you can have extra pay. You can try and get valued workers to reconsider. You're not going to fight for someone who's not a good worker if they're leaving, or you've been trying to get them to quit. But if you perform an exit interview, then you can try and find out why, and you can kind of use that as a way of going, you know what, management needs to do better in these areas, because 4 people have left in the last month, and they all said it's because of this particular manager and their strategies. So you can actually improve the business when those people leave, but they were never going to tell you that until they were leaving, because they didn't want to get treated badly. Another voluntary form of separation is retirement, and again, you don't think about that very often. Something that can be done is workers can ease into retirement. If you're in the HR department, you might suggest this. Why would you want someone to ease into retirement? Well, they might be able to use their last month to train their replacement. So if it's particularly like a higher level job, they might be able to say, hey, you know what? This person has all these skills and experience. You really don't want someone retiring and taking all their training and all their skills and all their experience with them. So you keep them on maybe a couple of days a week or something, and kind of ease them into retirement, which is good for them because they kind of slow down rather than just, stopping completely. And it's also good for the business because they can pass on their training and their skills before they actually leave. HR's role in this is to also make sure that there aren't some other issues that are leading to an early retirement. Someone might decide to retire, but they didn't want to retire. They were just allowed to retire, and they took that opportunity. There's no mandatory retirement age unless you're in the High Court, but there's no mandatory retirement age. So there might be some other issues that are causing you to leave. So ideally, you don't want to lose that person if they're still doing a good job. You don't want to lose that person. So you might want to find out why. So you might again do exit interviews or talk to them about, okay, you made the decision to retire. We don't think you should. We think that you're still able to do the job. Is it something that's happening at the workplace that's causing this to happen? Now, retrenchment, aka redundancy, when people are made redundant, when they are retrenched, is when their position is no longer needed. So it's not really about the worker is bad or the business is bad. It's when the business has changed. So say there's some new technology, business has decided, right, we're going to use this new technology. So they get replaced with technology. So the worker can be either redeployed, they can be moved to a different part of the business, or they can be made redundant and they can get a redundancy payout usually, and that costs the business a lot of money. The reason that this is not voluntary or involuntary is because there are 2 ways you can do it. You can do it the voluntary way, or you can do it the involuntary way, really depending on what's happening in the business at the time. Voluntary redundancy is when the business asks for volunteers to take redundancy. All right, who wants to be made redundant? Knowing that the people are probably going to be made redundant anyway. So that's why people might put their hand up. They might say, you know what, we're probably going to get made redundant, so why don't we volunteer and take this payout that they're offering, or the business is going downhill and we're just going to lose our jobs completely, or we might not get any benefits at all. We're going to volunteer. The advantage of this is that there's going to be less conflict. Not no conflict at all, but the workers are going to feel like they have at least some control over what's happening to them. They can put their hand up and say, you know what, I'm going to take the redundancy payout. I think I can go and find another job somewhere else, so I'm going to take the payout. The disadvantage, though, is that you're probably still not going to get enough volunteers. As much as people might think, oh well, this business is going downhill. Some people will just hold on to their jobs until the very last second, so they usually don't get enough volunteers. So the business will probably, even though they decided to go with voluntary redundancy, they're probably going to have to also do some involuntary redundancies, which is where the business decides who goes. Usually they're going to just like pick a system, like they could do last on first off. So whoever was hired most recently, they're going to be the person let go, first. Or they could do it based on usefulness. They can go, okay, we're just going to do a cost benefit analysis with all our employees, and which ones are the most cost to the business, with the least benefit. Now, the advantage of this is that you're not going to lose good workers based on them volunteering, right? So like me, if I was offered a redundancy payout, I'd probably take it because I'm very, very employable. I can just take that money and then just go and find another job the next week. But that's not a good thing because I'm a good worker. I work very, very hard. So I would be lost to the business if they did it voluntarily. So if they did it involuntarily, they could probably say, you know what, we're not going to give people a choice. We're just going to get rid of the useless people and keep the useful people. And it can be a nice culling of the people who aren't very useful to the business as well. The disadvantage obviously is going to cause some conflict and loss of motivation. If you have 50 workers, you make 20 of them redundant, the other 30 are going to be going, you know what, it's only a matter of time. I'm not going to invest my time into this business or my efforts into this business. I'm going to stay late and all that sort of stuff because it's a sinking ship. And they might end up looking for other jobs, even while they're at work, and decide that they're going to go that way. So that's why retrenchment can be voluntary or involuntary, and those are all the different ways that you can separate from the business. And that's the last of the processes, and then you should move on now to the strategies in human resource management.